friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I wanted to talk a bit about why I can my potatoes and why and what the value is of it. Now the other day I had someone on my Instagram who saw a picture of me canning my potatoes and asked, what is the value of canning potatoes? Well, I'm going to talk about that. Now, first of all, for us, we do not have a root cellar, nor do we have the space to put in a root cellar, nor is our area the wisest place to have a root cellar because of the amount of rain that we get. In fact, there's not a whole lot of people around here that have basements. There are some, but not a lot because of the heavy amount of rain that we get. But with that in mind, because we don't have a root cellar, I do not have a really great way of storing my potatoes. Out in the shop, it's going to get too cold in the coldest part of winter that will freeze my potatoes, and I don't want that to happen. And inside, I can make them last for a good amount of time if I don't have too many back in our pantry room, which we do not keep heated, and keeping them in a paper bag. And obviously throwing straw and stuff in there is going to help prevent rot. But that's usually not my problem is rot. Usually the problem is they just sit and they start to shrivel up and just get kind of soft. And anyway, before I can work through them all. So with the amount of potatoes that I'm getting, even off of our small little 1/3 acre piece of property, so far I've dug up 60 pounds of potatoes at the time of shooting this video, and I'm guessing I have a minimum of another 30 pounds to dig up. And I filled up 14 quart jars and got them pressure canned and ready to put away. I just gotta label them and then do that. So that's one reason why I can them, is so that I can have at least some put away like that and not have to worry about working through the rest of them quite so quickly. Because I think this year I'll be getting at least 1/3 more potatoes than I got last year, which was probably about 1/3 more than I got the year before that. So each year I seem to be getting a little bit more potatoes, and I got to come up with more ways of storing them so that they can get us through the whole year. Now maybe you have a root cellar and some good ways of storing your potatoes so that you can use them as is throughout the whole year. But what are some other benefits to having some home canned potatoes on hand? Well, I'm going to go over that with you because I have 3 basic ways that I use them, and there's more other ways that you can. Now for me, the most common way is I like to use them for making potato salad. So let's say you get invited to a barbecue in the middle of the day and you're really busy and you realize you don't have time to make up something a little more fancy, or you don't have time to make a potato salad from scratch, cooking the potatoes and all that, peeling and cutting and cooking. Well, all you need to do is open up a jar of your potatoes, or 2, depending on how big of a potato salad you're making. Maybe get some of your fermented eggs out of the refrigerator, and your homemade mayonnaise, that's easy to whip up, only takes 5 minutes, and you can throw together a potato salad really quick. Oh, and don't forget your homemade refrigerator pickles, and I'll be doing a video on that soon too. And then you've got some potato salad. It was so easy to throw together and so quick that you didn't have to stress yourself with either running to the store and buying potatoes to peel them and cut them and then cook them and all that. They're already cooked, they're already peeled, they're already cut. All you got to do is mix it all together and you're ready to go. Same thing applies for making a soup or a stew. You can pull out a jar of your home canned beef or venison or elk or chicken, or even of ground beef or elk or venison, and lots of home canned beef, ground beef on hand, home canned beef. I didn't can any elk or venison yet. I have all that frozen, but I can at any time. If I need to, pull it out of the freezer and can it up. But either way, I have it all ready to go. It's all cut up in pieces. I could throw in a jar of the meat, throw in a jar of potatoes, and whatever else vegetables I have on hand, and there's my soup right there. It's super, super easy and fast. It takes you 5 minutes of prep time to throw together some soup with your home canned potatoes and other home canned foods or dehydrated foods. Another thing you can do is you can fry these and make them like a fried potato, the way you do it is going to be a little bit different though, obviously, than if you started with a raw potato. With a raw potato, you're going to start out cooking it a little bit on a little lower heat because you want to make sure you get the potato cooked all the way through before you really start to brown it on the outside. Now, I always fry my potatoes in organic coconut oil. I simply heat the oil up, get it good and hot first, throw the potatoes in because all you need to do is heat them through and brown them, and it should only take a few minutes really to do that. You can also mash these potatoes up. So let's say it's Thanksgiving time, you're really busy preparing your pies, your cranberry sauce, your breads, your turkey, everything else, and you realize you still have to cut and peel and cook the potatoes for the mashed potatoes. Well, all you got to do is open up 1, 2, 3 jars of potatoes, put them in a pot, heat them through. I mean, you don't have to cook them, they're already cooked. You just want to get them hot, right? And then drain them out, maybe rinse them a little bit, and then process them up the way you normally would when you make your mashed potatoes. They're already cooked, they're already ready to go. It's super easy to do. I'm sure there's so many other great ideas out there, and so what I'm hoping is that I'll have people out there that are following me that are already canning their potatoes. Maybe they cut them up differently. Like me, I like to cut them like this because this is a good size for what I need for whether it be stew or fried potatoes or potato salad. Maybe some people will can them differently, maybe more like a scallop potato. And so go ahead and share with us down below the ways you like to use your home canned potatoes so that people coming in here can find the value of canning potatoes and why they should consider doing that for themselves. Now, I do have a video out on a fairly recent one about food preparation, food storage and all that kind of stuff, and I'll go ahead and link to that right up here because I talk a little bit more about some of this kind of stuff, but not just potatoes, but other home canned things and why I like to have them on hand. Canning is not the only way I preserve. I'm pretty broad. I use fermentation, I use freezing, I use dehydrating, and I use canning. They all have their benefits and value, so you just have to find what's going to work best for you. I know Linda's Pantry in particular has a video on canning potatoes, and she does it the raw pack method, which is what I do. I do not cook the potatoes first. I did that the very first year that I grew a whole bunch of potatoes and canned them, and that was 2013. And I didn't like it. And the only reason I cooked them first is because when I was looking online, that's all I could find was you must cook them first. You must cook them first. I don't know why, because I did not like them at all. They seemed, it was weird because they got mushy and yet at the same time seemed too dry. They would fall apart when you try to do anything with them, and the flavor just was not that great. But the raw packing is, not only is it saving a huge step, they just turn out better. The texture's better, the flavor's better. It tastes more like a freshly cooked potato. Like you just peeled it, you cut it up, you cooked it, and there it is. They're just so much better. And yes, some people complained about them turning out more starchy, the water, but it turns out starchy anyway. And if that's an issue, you just rinse them off. It's not that hard to do if you're not wanting all that starch on there. Just put them in a colander and rinse them off. So when you're canning potatoes, you want to go, if it's a quart jar, 90 minutes, and for our elevation, it's 10 pounds of pressure is what I use for 90 minutes. If you live higher up, you might need 15 pounds of pressure, and I don't know, the time might be different. So you're gonna need to have some good books on hand about canning to know your elevation and know what pressure you need to can at. But then there's all those other steps. You got to let your canner vent for the All-American. It's 7 minutes. For most other pressure canners, it's 10 minutes before you put your weight on there, and then you got to let it get up to pressure, and then you set your timer. It's a very long process. Now the way I do it that's different, I always cold pack it, which means, because to me it makes the most sense. I'm filling these jars one at a time. I'm getting interrupted a zillion times a day, and so my jars are clean, they're ready to go. I just put in my salt and a little bit of cold water, and I use my filtered rainwater, and then I start cutting up the potatoes and throwing them in there, and then when I get the jar full, I top it off with the cold water. It's actually room temperature water. And then since my canner is sitting outside, the easiest way for me to fill it was with cold water from the hose. I put the water in, I put the jars in the cold water. I don't want to put hot jars in the cold water. Everything's going to heat up together. There's no concern of the jars breaking. I've never had this problem. So everything's cold going in and they all heat up at the same time, so nothing's going to break. That's the only reason I could think that even with the raw pack method, why some people would say put hot liquid over it, is maybe they're assuming you're going to put it into a hot canner. My canner is never hot. Everything starts out cold, and then I slowly heat it up and then turn the heat up as it gets hotter, and then let it get up to the right temperature and the right pressure, and then time it from there. And so that's the major difference that I do. That's my one unconventional way, is not pouring hot liquid over my potatoes where maybe everyone else will. And that goes for anything I can. I do it all that same way, even when I'm doing the hot water bath method. I do not put the jars into hot water unless I've just made a big batch of jam, put the jam in the hot jars, and then I do make sure the water's hot and then put them in there. So it just depends on what I'm doing. That's the only thing I do it with. Everything else that I can, I do the way I just talked about. Two things that can cause heated debates, and that's canning and how you care for your cast iron. And so I don't like to talk about those things too much because it can cause some really heated debates. There are some very strict rules though that you do need to pay attention to when it comes to home canning. You know, especially, you know, when you start getting into low acid foods like potatoes, you must pressure can them, and you must pressure can them for a certain amount of time. If you're doing pint jars, it's going to be 75 minutes, 90 minutes for quarts. Now, if you're new to canning, for me, I just go mostly by this. This is the book that came with my All-American canner. All I do is look up times. I don't go by any specific recipes. However, if you're a stickler for staying to specific recipes when it comes to canning, then I recommend this book right here. It's a complete book of home preserving by Ball. And I will link to this below, as well as the pressure canner that I use, and it will come with this, and it will have all the information you need about what you're canning, just the very basics. Especially if you're new to canning, I recommend having this book on hand. I personally have had very little use for this because I have all I need right here, but there are a lot of great recipes in here that you may want to follow, and there's 400 delicious and creative recipes for today in this book. Really not a difficult process once you understand how it all works. And each canner is probably going to work a little bit differently as far as, you know, how, like I say, for the All-American, it's 7 minutes venting time where everything else will say 10. So it just depends on what canner you have, so pay attention to that too. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video about canned potatoes, and that you will consider, if you haven't started yet, canning them for yourself, or even, you know, even if you don't need to preserve them this way, you may want to, just for the sake of having a few cans of potatoes on hand for the ease, you know, of having that convenience food. It's your own convenience food that's far healthier than anything you're ever going to find in the store. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.